Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Sunday conversation. I'm Erica Robinson, the author of The Language of Lenormand. You see me here during the week, reading predictively on news of our world, our nation. But anyway, on Sundays, I like to take a break from that and have a friend join me. And today I have a guest, and I'm so excited. This is Nancy Hendrickson. Hi, Nancy.
Hey, Erica.
Nancy is very well known as sort of what would you call, what would be a good noun?
Oh, the ancestral person.
Person. Okay, she wants me to use person. She is, I mean, I could say the queen. I could say but she is, yes, known as the ancestral person. Um, Nancy's the author of Ancestral Tarot. You can hold that up because that's a groundbreaking book. Um, Also, Ancestral Grimoire.
I have right here.
Yes. And we can talk about those as well. But the reason that Nancy has come on today is that she has completed the final work of the trilogy, just in time for, she's got black on, I've got orange on. So think Halloweeny thoughts, even though we're still in August. But just in time for that season, she has added to the trilogy the final work, which is called Ancestral Seance. I read the manuscript as it was in process, and it's an amazing book. So
Thank you.
I wanted to have you come on and talk about just sort of a few things. One, the trilogy. I'd like you to talk about how these books work together as a trilogy, how you see people using them in that way. And then I wanted to focus on this new book, Ancestral
Okay.
Seance. So, uh, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I'm honored to be one of your guests because I watch all your Sunday shows and you have some amazing people on.
Yes, I've been really blessed by my guests, and of course, I am thrilled to have you as one of them finally at long
Thank
last.
you. Thank you.
So, tell us first about the other two books. Ancestral Tarot is considered groundbreaking. Can you
Right.
tell us about how that book came to be and why you
Sure.
think it has so resonated with people?
Erica, I've been working with family history since I was a kid. And so almost all of my books before Ancestral Tarot were genealogy books. I wrote a best-selling book about how to use Ancestry.com. So I had a very lengthy history of genealogy, but I also had a lengthy history of tarot from my 20s. So, except for a decade or so of my life, I've always done both the things. And I had the idea, this was pre-COVID, of, no one has ever mashed those two things together. Because for me, tarot is an incredible, not only a divinatory tool, it is a great mediumistic tool. It is a wonderful way to communicate with people who are no longer on the earth plane. So, Ancestral Tarot really shows you how to use tarot, even if you don't know tarot, I cover that. It shows how to use tarot to communicate with your ancestors. And I talk about the ancestors of blood. So this would be your DNA line back however long, and the ancestors of time. And that may be ancestors that were yours in another lifetime and ancestors of place. And that is, we all have places of origin in our family tree. We often don't know what it is, but we all do have it. So I break the book down into those three big sections. So um, people really can get a foot in this door of understanding their own family line, because a lot of the things we do in everyday life We do them because we grew up with them. Our parents did them because their parents did them and
Mhm.
their parents. And one of the things I talk about in the book is if you look back through immigration records, like from Ellis Island, it was not uncommon for someone to come to America with $1 in their pocket, 30 cents in their pocket. And unfortunately, in some families, that lack of money carried down through generations, even though there was no longer any reason to have that poverty consciousness, but it was so ingrained in a family history that today's family may be very tight with their money simply because of that immigrant.
So we hear the word epigenetics, and it's a big word. Uh, People say on my channel here that they like my big vocabulary. So epigenetics is one of those words that sounds very sciencey because it kind of is. Um, but in relation to your book and your work, epigenetics is just sort of that genetic memory that we have.
Right.
And it's kind of like what you're talking about. If your family's tight with money and you're like, well, where does that come from? Let's say I've got all the money in the world, but I'm still really cheap or tight or frugal or worried about money all the time. Where does that come from? It's that epigenetic memory. It's literally what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And families a lot of times either don't know, like you say, or they don't talk about it. But one of the things that's amazing about your work is that it gives people tools to sort of ask those questions that your living relatives may not want to talk about, but your relatives on the other side are eager to talk about and clue you in on. And I think there may be viewers, people who come to this channel. A lot of them know about divination and cards, but a lot of them don't. This is their first exposure to that kind of work. So, what I love about your work is that the accessibility of this kind of stuff to the average person. We all have the right to ask those questions of our ancestors. You know what I mean? To get that information so that we can move forward in our lives. So
That's
can you say a word about epigenetics and in relation to your work?
I think there are, well, we're babies in the field of genetics, I believe.
Mhm,
And I believe that we do carry down these ancestral memories uh, in terms of what you're talking about of epigenetics, but I think it goes much further back in our history because I swear you can get a group of people in the forest sitting around a campfire toasting marshmallows, and there is some epigenetic memory of us as cave people sitting around a fire. I have felt it,
mhm,
and it's we have this kind of fear of that dark forest behind us. Is there a tiger back there? And there is a discomfort of being deep in a forest, sitting around a fire with other people. And I see that I feel strongly that that is part of our epigenetic memory as well.
mhm,
Um, it is, I have I'm not going to go down the DNA road, but I do want to say, I think at some point in the future, they will find encoded in our DNA is so much more information about us as individuals than than anybody ever thought.
mhm,
I think so much about us is so unique, and I said I wasn't going to talk about DNA. I'm going to say one other thing. We don't inherit this beautiful long string of DNA from our ancestors. We get a chunk from 300 years ago. We get a chunk from 100 years ago. We get all these little chunks. So I have three siblings. None of us have DNA that's exactly like the other. My brother is 40% Scottish, mine is 10%. So, we know so little about how that happens. And I look forward, hope I live long enough to know, to see what we really know.
mhm. hmm
Find out
So
why
you
they came
say
up.
that if you have a relative, let's say, who's passed over, and maybe they weren't
I know what you're going to
the
say.
nicest person in the world to you,
Yeah,
that that's not the person that you necessarily have to seek out. I mean, you can wish them well and wish them peace and joy and happiness and enlightenment and all of that, but you knew them in a certain kind of way. But that you can go back, 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 that there will be ancestors in your line who wish you nothing but good.
absolutely. I always see them as your personal cheering section.
Mhm.
We think about ancestors as, our great grandparents, great great grandparents. But I was at a conference in Canada, and we were doing ancestral work, and two of the people at the table had ancestors come through who were prehistory. So we will call them the prehistoric ancestors. So don't be surprised if somebody from so far back pops up when you're working through ancestral tarot.
So now tell us a little bit about Ancestral Grimoire, the second book in the trilogy.
I have a theory. I have a lot of theories, but I had a theory about Ancestral Grimoire. I felt that anybody who is drawn to this work, whether they play around with tarot with their girlfriends on a Saturday night and have a glass of wine and play with cards, or you're a serious diviner like you are, Erica, I I feel like we all are called to this because we have some kind of magical ancestry. I feel like somebody or somebody's in our family line were really magical people. And so Ancestral Grimoire takes that as a given. And it takes from January to December, you meet a magical ancestor. Now, some of them you'll really vibe with. Some of them it's like, nah, no, I'm not into that solar shaman guy. Um, so there are 12 different types of magic throughout the year. And the book, you can pick up the book and start anytime you want, or you can wait and start in January and meet 12 different ancestors who come through. So it's a very different take than ancestral tarot,
Mm-hmm.
but it really works with the magic in your family line, and it helps you realize how magical you really are. And there are a lot of there's a lot of exercises in Ancestral Grimoire because I wanted people to try whether it's there's a phrase called whistling up the wind. That is a magical thing, that there is a way of whistling that causes the wind to come up. So you can try the magical whistling, you can try, so many other exercises and see what suits you.
One of the things that I think is very cool is that not just that it's the trilogy that we're talking about, but there is a sort of a developmental progression, I guess you could say. So we're starting with Ancestral Tarot, which introduces you to the idea that you can that you have these connections to these ancestors from, again, as you say, the beginning of human time, and that you can ask them questions and all of that and have relationships with them. Then you move to Ancestral Grimoire, which is kind of a handbook that takes you month by month. And now we have Ancestral Seance, which is the sort of the subtitle or whatever you want to call it, that is 30 evenings of talking to the dead. So I want to talk about the word seance, first of all. I mean, we've got our Halloween colors on,
Yeah,
so
we do.
so get everybody in the mood. But you know, uh, I remember first hearing about the word seance when I was a girl. I went to a girls' school, and so there would be sleepovers, and you know, we would gaze into candles, we would levitate each other. we would, I mean, but we also felt we were doing something a little, risque, uh, and uh, sort of unapproved by whatever powers that be, meaning parents and teachers and things like that. So the word seance was always freighted with mystery and
Mm,
with the forbidden nature of things. But you have uh, deconstructed it, the word seance, to make it something that is, I think, again, as is true with your other work, really friendly, really accessible and doable. And the reason that I love having this conversation with you is that that was certainly my intention with Lenormand. I think
right,
with Lenormand, there was a theory, even among the people who are, the greats of the Lenormand world, that Lenormand the rules had to be strictly adhered to, that you could only use Lenormand for certain kinds of questions, and that it was not really something that could be taught. You would go to somebody and they would, And so what I wanted to do is to demystify it, to say to people, kind of what you've said, it is your birthright by virtue of being a human being
right.
to access um, uh, information across worlds because we are, as the very trite but very beautiful saying goes, we are spirits, we're souls having a human experience. We are souls, and so we're entitled to this kind of connection. So can you
Yeah.
talk about first the word seance and what it means to you, what it has historically meant to you, what has it historically meant sort of generally, and why you picked that word?
You know, historically, people would gather, candles would be lit, the room would be dark, they would sit around a table, sometimes holding hands, sometimes with their hands on the table. And oftentimes, things would come floating in the air, like a trumpet, a key. And because seances were the picking grounds of those who were walking on the wrong side of the law, they were fake. And I don't know if you've heard this story, but the magician Houdini tried most of his life to get in touch with his mother in spirit. And so he went to seance after seance and proved all of them to be fake. So that is sadly the history of seance. For me, though, it is setting a sacred space, a respectful space that's quiet, that I do light a candle, and I try through whatever method. For me, it's either going to be tarot or oracle cards. For other people, like Carrie Paris, it could be charms. Whatever your tool is, it is fine. But we use those tools to try and communicate with spirit in a respectful way. And I chose seance because there are 30 different seances or ways to communicate with spirit in the book Ancestral Seance. Um, it felt right to me, and I pay attention to what feels how things feel. Feels right.
Well, you come by the idea honestly, because can you talk a little bit about your
Yeah,
grandparents?
and in fact, I have something here to show everybody listening. Uh, Probably 100 years ago, maybe less, um, my grandparents attended seances,
Hmm.
and there was a method that you took two small chalkboards, put chalk in between them, tied them up together, did the seance asking spirit to come, and when you open, there's writing on them.
So
Well,
writing that they didn't write.
they did not write. And I have the boards from their last seance, which would have been well over 100 years ago. Here's one of them. And hopefully you can see that.
There's the writing on it too. Yeah.
And there's writing. And the other board, it's very faint, but there's writing here as well.
So
Now,
this writing was not there until
correct, Spirit
Spirit
wrote it.
wrote it.
So two things I found really interesting because I think in this business, it is good to be skeptical uh, because we take a lot of pride in our work. And so two things stuck out to me. An ancestor called Stephen Snow signed one of these chalkboards.
Mhm.
And I can't show it to you because it's so faint. Um, but in doing genealogy research, I found his signature on a will, and it was the same signature. So I thought, okay, that's pretty freaky. But then several years ago, I went to a psychic artist, and he drew one of my spirit guides, and it's just a picture in pastels. And it weirdly looked very much like this guy.
Wow.
So it is amazing.
Hey, did that guy that you just pulled out, did Spirit draw that?
Yes.
Excuse
And
me,
in
Mom.
fact, this is how, this is how skeptical I thought. Well, they couldn't have had colored chalk 100 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, yeah.
So I actually looked it up and colored chalk was there 100 years ago. It's actually older than 100 years old. So yeah, the spirit, when these boards were put together, drew this. The I've had a friend photograph it in Photoshop and Photoshop it so I can actually read it. It's kind of silly. It's like here are your lucky numbers. Here's where I left that key. It's like little messages to some were for my grandfather, some were for my grandmother. So yeah, you could say I came by it honestly. But Erica, my father was very psychic, I am told. I didn't know him that well, so he passed away when I was young. But my mother was incredibly tapped into other lifetimes. And so, I it's not that psychic stuff runs in my DNA.
Mhm.
It doesn't. But I happen to have been raised in a family that was so open to new ideas, other ideas, weird ideas, that for me to explore it was supported.
Well, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't run through your DNA. It seems,
Well, I suppose it could,
but I
but
mean, couldn't the argument be that it actually runs through all of our DNA,
everybody's, yes, that is absolutely true. I
right?
think so. I think we just don't give ourselves permission to say, oh my gosh, I heard this weird thing. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was a neighbor. And not giving ourselves the option of saying, oh, that was my grandmother's voice I heard.
Mhm.
I mean, we don't give ourselves a lot of permission
Well,
to.
and we've been encouraged not to because conventional religion discourages it. And I think that it's not because uh, traditional religion believes that it's not a real thing. It's that traditional religion wants to keep that real thing to itself. And
I
so
think
they make
that's
it
true.
sound like it's some awful thing that you shouldn't be touching. Now, I just want to say one word or talk about one thing, and then there's other things I wanted to ask you about, but the Ouija board. Now, let me just say, my father was a very smart guy, but he was young when he went to college, like 16. So I said to him one time, "Did you ever use a Ouija board?" He looked at me, his face was so serious, and he said, "Yes." He said, "When I first went to college, we got together, there was a Ouija board." And I said, "Oh, what happened?" He said, I'm not going to tell you that, but I'm going to tell you this. When you open a door like that, in that way, you don't know what will come through. And so it's like a party line. And some of my older viewers, many of my older people know what a party line is. Not that we experienced it, but we heard about it. But you don't know what's coming through. And he said he would never touch a Ouija board. So I've always been like, but when you think about seance and Ouija board, that kind of goes together. Can you say a word about the Ouija board and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, two things, a couple things. Uh, I I'm with your father. I will never use a Ouija board. And it is because of my own experience. I first, if most people aren't old enough to remember this, but back in the day, it was kind of sold as a kid's toy. It wasn't some adult thing, it was a kid thing. And so I was a kid and at my aunt and uncle's, and one of my cousins had received a Ouija board and we were playing with it. And I thought, wow, this is really accurate. And it was accurate. But later, sometime in my late teens, I was with a group of friends using it, and the energy coming through that board was so negative, so black, and so evil. It was just a darkness. And I would say the same thing you just said. It is like opening a door and saying, okay, whoever's out there,
Never.
come in.
Mhm.
That's what a Ouija board does. So I stay away from them. Totally. But in terms of the seance book, I actually write a chapter about keeping yourself well protected when you're doing spiritual work. But it doesn't matter if it's a seance or me sitting here doing a reading for a client. I always keep myself well protected. I always specify that no one, no thing of a lower vibration is allowed in my space.
Or
So,
the way I say it, shorthand version, get thee behind me, Satan. Mhm.
okay, you get okay. But I've worked with people who have such fear about working with spirit that and they do have a very religious background. So for them, I will say, imagine, picture in your mind a giant angel, many of them, with flaming swords. Imagine them at every single window, every single door in your home, and they will keep everything out.
Mhm.
So, we all have to approach that whole being protected thing in a different way.
Can I say a word about that? Because you use the word imagine, and people have an idea about imagination that it's pretend, that it's not real, that it's. But I always tell clients everything that you see in the world began first as a thought.
That's right.
So, so so imagination is not sort of something to kind of one of the things we talked about before we came on was this idea of it's related to this imagination thing. Of course, I had just had a brain fart, so I have no idea what I'm about to say or what I was
Okay.
going to say. But um, how do you know what you're receiving is real, and how do you know it's not just your imagination? And should we take the word just out, which implies that imagination is not really worth anything, and should we bring imagination into our embrace as part of our toolbox,
Sure.
because you're not getting something out of nowhere. Something's coming to you for a reason. Can you talk about that? I mean, I know it's not the book, and I want to get back to the book in a minute.
That's okay. You know, um, Years ago, my profession was writing for magazines. And I believed that every idea in the world is swirling out in the universe somewhere, and it's just ours to reach and pick it out. So I used to say, when you write for magazines, you send a letter to the editor saying, here's my idea. So more than once, many times, I would get a letter saying, no, thank you. And then 2 years later, they would write the same story that I had pitched 2 years earlier. And I think it's kind of like that. I could see this thing, I picked this idea, I was just two
Too
years
early.
ahead. I was too early. Yeah. But I think that's how it works, that we see it, we're able to grab it, grab a hold of it. It's like ancestral tarot. I did genealogy and tarot for decades, and it wasn't until just pre-COVID that it's like, I can put these together and work with the ancestors.
That's like, well, I'm always saying that physics and metaphysics
They're
are
so,
basically the same thing. It's just that there's such a chasm in our understanding of each of them. But that's kind of what you're saying as well.
yeah, absolutely. So it's just be open to pulling those ideas in terms of knowing whether am I just making this stuff up? Part of that's number one, it's common. When
Hmm.
you first start doing this work, you will find yourself saying, I'm just making this stuff up. But practice, 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 and you'll start seeing how accurate you are. And for some people, it's like the proof is in the pudding. It has to be proven to them that what they're getting is accurate. And I say that I am about 85% accurate. And I've often said in some areas of life, I don't want to be 100% accurate. So spirit obliges me.
I think the best of us who do this work would agree with that percentage, about 85%. Listen, if we were 100%, the government would have snatched us up,
I know.
put us in a secure facility, and we would be doing fortunes for
Stock,
who.
the stock market.
Yeah. So
But yes, to your point, that is true.
right, I want to do two things.
Okay.
One is mechanical, and I want to mention it now, and then I will mention it at the end. And then I wanted to ask some questions about the book. So
Okay, but can you hold those for just a second? Will you
yeah,
remember them?
yeah.
I want to talk about intention, about
Please.
setting intention. And in this work, you set the intention of, I really want to communicate with my grandmother, with the caveat of, unless my grandmother is off doing her own path in spirit, I don't want to bother her. But you do come into this work with setting an intention, and our lives revolve around the intentions that we set every day. And in fact, just before we hit record, I said, I'm going to draw a card from my Ancestral Magic deck. I shuffled it. You saw me shuffle it. And I said, I know it's going to be the outlaw.
And
And,
sure enough,
and I drew the card. And oh my God, it was the outlaw.
yeah.
But I set that intention.
Yeah.
I knew that was what it was going to be. And seriously, the more you practice, the better you get.
The more you practice, the better. And I mean, I know as a reader, yeah, I've read for, I mean, I don't even know how many people, but uh, when I was in a shop reading, people would ask me if I could bring their father through or, someone in spirit. And there was a rule in the shop that only one person did mediumship. So, so I couldn't advertise this is something that I did. So when I got asked, at first I had the deer in headlights look like, ooh, I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to refer them to the person down the hall. But then I thought, you know what? The cards, the cards are my friend, and the cards will help me. So I said, I'm not a medium, so that was so I wouldn't get in trouble with the boss. But all things are possible through the cards. So let's see. And then what would happen is I would get little snippets. So someone would come and I would say, okay, I don't know why I'm getting this, but there's the lyric from this particular song. And I would say the lyric, and they would say, oh my God, that was my father's favorite song. And I was just listening to that in the car. And I'd be like, or I'd smell tobacco. And they would have been someone who smoked a pipe or something like that. Or one time I said, listen, this is going to sound really weird. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. This was a dad uh, that I was bringing through. And I said to the woman, I said, here's what I keep hearing him say. And it's with this accent. I got you. Not I've got you or I have you. The ch. I got you. He always used to say that to her. So I think the more open you are, the
That's
more you're given, the more the channel kind of widens, and you will get lots of things like sounds or smells,
right.
or accents in that case. So
Exactly.
before I was into this work, I just thought it was all just weird and no, pass me with that. But as soon as started to open up or set the intention that I be given information, I mean, you discover that you're living in the real world, but simultaneously, you're living this whole other world that is so much wider and more colorful and more peopled and more nuanced than anything that we experience in the 3D.
True. So I interrupted you when you had two
Oh
more
yeah,
things
I want to
specific
just say
to.
this really quickly because I know people are saying, "Ooh, let me get my hands on that book because I've got the other two and I want the third because it's a trilogy, like Lord of the Rings, right? You want to, Harry Potter, you want to get the whole set." Okay. Can you discuss what's going on right now with this?
Okay. Ancestral Tarot and Ancestral Grimoire were done through a publishing house. And I decided for a number of reasons to self-publish Ancestral Seance. Uh, Mostly because when you self-publish, you have so many more options than you ever have with a house. And it's really as simple as that. And I mean, when you self-publish, you are basically hiring an artist who did this fantastic cover, the book formatting, the editing, because God knows I am the world's worst editor. So I had the world's pickiest editor edit this book. So the Kindle version on Amazon is perfect. It's great. Go buy it. Thank you. The print version, I've had one person talk about printing problems with the book. So in other words, when it was printed, the printer did not do as good a job as they should have. So I am in the process of changing where I'm having the book printed. So it's available for Amazon right now. I'm pretty sure still on print, but I would recommend that you buy the Kindle version.
The Kindle version, also the audio version is also fine.
That's correct. Um, if you bought the print and you had a problem, return it to Amazon.
Right. But
That's,
you will find another option for
I
the.
am going to find another printer. Yes.
So if you want the book now, you got to have it right this minute. Amazon, the Kindle version is available and perfect, as is the audio version. But if you want, your bookshelf to have all three books, please wait a bit until you get the all clear. I certainly will announce it on my channel
Right.
when the print version is available and how you can get that.
You
So
know, Virgos get a really bad rap for being perfectionistic. And my birthday is in a week or so, and I am very Virgo. So having a book go out that is not as good as it should be print-wise bugs me. And I don't really want it out.
right. So go for the Kindle or the audio, or else wait until you hear that you've got the all clear to get the print
Right.
version.
Thanks for
Okay.
mentioning that.
So I wanted to mention that. I'll say it quickly at the end too, for just so we're clear. But can you tell us more about this book? So it's 30 evenings of talking to the dead. So say more about how you
Okay.
structured this and how people can use this book.
Well, the good news for people who do not use tarot is that of the 30, there are only three seances that actually ask that you use tarot. Beyond that, you can use any oracle deck that feels right to you. And I actually do give suggestions for decks in the book because there are a couple of really good decks that for ancestral work. One is called The Beloved Dead. One is called The Relative Tarot, both by my friend, Erica's friend, Carrie Paris. They're fabulous. And so, again, any oracle deck that feels right to you, and there are many decks that are Halloweenish or Day of the Dead. In fact, my deck, the Oracle, is totally designed around the Mexican Day of the Dead because I live on the border with of Mexico, and it's quite a tradition here where I live. So now that I've said that, I have totally lost track of what your original question was
Tell us
about the book.
about the book.
God. Okay, so there are 30 seances. Three of them require tarot. They go from incredibly simple to the last 9 seances. I call the kitchen table seances because they don't require cards. They require things like a spoon or a mirror or salt, things that are typical around your house. And there are no electronic gadgets in here at all. You don't have to go out buy it.
One of those meters.
A little meter thing. Yeah. No, you don't have to do that. And the kitchen table seances, although they are simpler, are actually a little harder. And I have had great success with several seances. The kitchen table seances, honestly, I'm still working on. I am not an expert at them.
Now, for the Virgos in the audience, they would ask this question. So it says 30 evenings of
Evenings.
talking to the dead. Is there a variety of ways that you could, for example, you could say, okay, for the month of October, I'm going to do one every night. Could you say, okay, I did that one and that was really good, and I'm going to do that same one once a week
Yes.
for the, I mean, can you pick and choose? Do you
You
have to
can
do it in
absolutely
order?
pick and choose. You could go 1 through 30 in a month. Uh, I wouldn't.
That's a lot of time with the dead, I'm just
It,
saying.
it is a lot of time with the dead. It is. And once you start doing this kind of work, it's not just, oh, I'm going to smack those cards down. I got it. I'm out the door. You actually want to sit and think about what did that ancestor, and it doesn't have to be your blood ancestor. It can be anybody in spirit that you're hoping to come through. So for me, I would try to work with Emily Dickinson, the poet, because she's always been a favorite of mine. But I would not do one a day. And because I've done all 30 of them, I tend to go back to the ones that I had the most success with. So in this case, uh, seance, it's actually seance 21, is a seance that, and it's the only one you do this with, you actually take a scarf or a veil and just put it over your face and be open to what comes through. Erica, I was so startled of my mother as a young woman, my dad as a teenager, my grandmother as a teenager.
Those are
These,
the people who came through
it
with
was like a little movie was coming through.
you.
But there are also cards. There was a spread to do with that particular seance to give you even more information. And what I would say is if you don't have the same experience I do, that's great. That's no big deal. We all experience spirit differently. You know, you may be able to see ghosts. I may be able to smell somebody's perfume. We all function very differently. So, but that Seance 21 was probably my favorite, and it's one that I will go back to time and again.
Now, seance, as it originally is intended, was, as you mentioned in the beginning, a group of people who gathered around a table, whatever. These can these be done in a group, or
Yes.
can they be done individually? Do you need to have other people around to do them?
No, you don't. You can do all of these by yourself. And the one that is very group oriented around the table, it's not your girlfriends or your boyfriends, it's spirits. So you're inviting different spirits to come sit around the table, each with a role to play in the seance.
That,
So you had a freaky look on your face, and that's
well,
like, oh my God.
I wanted to say a word, speaking of freaky look, about the subtitle, 30 Evenings of Talking to the Dead. Now, I mean, not for nothing, as we say where I come from in Jersey, that word, dead, I mean, I don't love the word. However,
Okay.
however, one of the things that all of your work does is um, it recasts, it it redefines, it broadens definitions, etc. And I think that that use of the word dead, I think that that does this as well. In other words, I mean, dead, it's, I mean, it's like the opposite of alive. But the fact of the matter is, we are alive and then we die. All of us. Nobody gets out alive, including you know who, the orange one who's about to find out. But I think the word for me, the reason, the way that it feels recast for me, I mean, I will never love the word, but I'm just saying, but the reason that it feels a little bit recast is that it just means in spirit, disembodied. And there's something to be said for being disembodied. I mean, it's wonderful to be in a body, right? We can experience each other in all the ways, and we can enjoy food and breathing and physical exertion and all of the things that we can smell stuff. It's great to be in a body, but it's also limiting to be in a body. And the dead are everywhere. I, I remember saying this about my father. I eulogized him when he died. And my father was a civil rights activist and worked with drug addicts, and he was very big in the world. And that meant that he was relatively unavailable to me as a child because he was this great man doing this great work. And who was I to bother him with my little things? But one of the things that I recognized when he died was that what I said in the eulogy was that now there was enough of him for everyone because there were no boundaries.
Right.
He was in spirit. So when I see 30 evenings of talking to the dead, I think of that. I think about the fact that the dead are spirit, and that spirit is what do I always I talk about, a prismatic, that I think that there's lots of different facets, both to human beings, but even more to spirit, so that you can summon a spirit using this. And you made a good point. You said, if they're doing their thing and don't want to come, that's fine. I mean, you don't want to make somebody do anything. And by the way, you can't. But um, I think that spirit can, I think that people can die and be about their business of learning their lessons from this life, planning the next life that they want to come to, and still be available to us. I
Yeah,
don't think we
I
put
think
this,
so too.
yeah, these three-dimensional limits on spirit, which is understandable because for us, we can't be 10 places at once. We can't talk to 10 people at once. We can't, cook and read a book and ride a bike and, take a walk all at the same time. But spirit can.
Spirit
I
guides.
believe that people can even have been reincarnated and off starting their next life and still be available to us.
I think that's true. So I have an idea, and
Okay.
you can tell me if you agree. So because I'm having this book printed somewhere else, I can change the title and the subtitle. So if people want to leave a comment about
Ooh,
30 evenings of working with spirit, 30 evenings of working with those beyond the veil, 30
that's
whatever
so
you
cool. You
choose.
guys, it's like a contest.
It's like a contest.
And my, just so you know, my, well, I'm sure you do know, but my the comment section is very vibrant, and I
Good.
think I hope you all will take advantage of this. You get to rename the book
Oh,
because I mean, maybe we all like the dead word. That's fine, but maybe something else would be more, I don't know,
scary, less scary.
scary.
Um, you know, I've worked with the ancestors literally since I was pre 10 years old. So the dead do not scare me. In fact, so many people in my family passed away before I was 20 that the dead are just like your family. They're just not in this present moment where you can see them. So I don't have that fear factor that I know is very common around death. And what I can say to people who feel that fear is that in my decades of doing this work, I know that the vast majority of your ancestors really love you and want you to be happy. And that you ask for help, they love. I have I am a typical Virgo, I'm always mishmashing about health. And so I will ask one of my ancestors who I know was a doctor, why not ask them for help? You know, eh, my grandfather, I never knew him, but I guess he was like quite a joker. It's like, help me live a life that is less intensely serious because I tend to be very serious. So why not ask them for what the help you need?
You know, I like that because it's a way for them to feel remembered and appreciated and useful to those of us who are slogging through this very thick miasma of Earth life.
Erica, my mom lived to 95, and when she got to maybe 85 or 90, I remember her saying to me the worst thing about age was that it felt like nobody needed her anymore.
Mhm.
And so I think in spirit, it's kind of similar. They like that we may not need them, but we certainly are happy to reach out for help, especially ones we know are really, really excel at something.
Right. And you're saying this not because it's your imagination and it's what you want to be the case, but because of your experience. And I will just tell the story. It's in my book of when I was first learning Lenormand, and was very little written out there about Lenormand. There was one book in English, um, The Secrets of the Lenormand Oracle by Sylvie Steinbach. And I always give her credit because that was the only book in English. Memorized that from cover to cover, and then I started practicing. And I remember I had a grand tableau, which is all the 36 cards out on my bed. And my husband had passed away. So I felt a little guilty that I was using up the whole bed to pull these cards. So I thought of him. And I'm looking at this spread and it just was swimming in front of my eyes. Because my eyes were tearing up because I didn't get it. And I heard his voice in my ear. Now I'm deaf in my right ear. I don't know if people know that, but I from when I was an infant. And so, but I heard his voice in my deaf ear, and his words were, Erica, it's not childbirth. And I thought, wait a minute, what? First of all, I just heard something in my deaf ear. Second of all, that's my husband and he's dead. Third of all, what does he know about childbirth? But then I thought, well, wait, he said it's not childbirth. So then I thought back and I remembered what childbirth was. I mean, No joke is what it was. Painful, hard work, pushing, etc. I had done all of that in relation to Lenormand, right? I had learned all the meanings, I had learned the numbers, I had learned the combinations, I had learned the classic spreads. I had done the childbirth part, my husband was saying. So when he said it was not childbirth, I thought, okay, well, what's the opposite of all of that hard work? And I thought, well, the opposite of bearing down is letting go. And I swear, in that moment, that GT became crystal clear. So clear, in fact, that I saw its limitations. And I thought, okay, this grand tableau tells us a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't want to know a little bit about a lot of things. What if I have a one question and I want to do a really deep dive in it? And that's how I came up with the spread that you've seen me using, pretty much every day with you all and what I use with clients. But it all came from my husband saying, Erica, in my deaf ears so that I would listen. It's not childbirth. So I can say this to you, and Nancy can talk about her experiences. And that's why, I mean, I believe because I see, I saw, I heard. You can take our word for it and try. And I think you will be surprised, pleasantly surprised at what you will learn about what's possible in terms of communication between worlds and across worlds. You know,
That is a good one. And I will say, in terms of how you approach the cards, I have read probably every Lenormand book written, and it wasn't until I read yours that I actually understood how to do Lenormand. And for tarot readers, Lenormand is notoriously difficult because tarot readers will always look for all the symbolism.
mhm.
So, oh, is that dog brown? Is that dog black? What does that actually
Or
mean?
is that foot pointing? Yeah.
Yeah, that is exactly what a tarot reader will do.
Yeah.
So to erase all that from your mind with Lenormand is a challenge, but your book certainly made it easy.
Well, it's the way that I do mediumship. I mean, it's through Lenormand. Is there anything else that you'd like us to know about not just Ancestral Seance, but about the trilogy, about the work, anything that you'd like to leave us with today?
Yeah, Erica, I'm on Substack, as you are, and my Substack is simply nancyhendrickson.substack.com. I'm sure you can put it in show notes. But Substack has a section called Notes, which is kind of the social media part of Substack. And I wrote this the other day, and I said, why do you care about working with ancestors? Why should we care? And I said, we had ancestors who were kick-ass. I mean, we wouldn't be here if
They
some of
weren't,
them were kick-ass people.
right?
So why not put ourselves in a position to learn how to be more authentic, how to live a happier life, how to be more prosperous? We're looking at uncountable generations of famine and war and God only knows what else, and we survived. They survived. So they're like our personal little, I don't know,
Cheering squad.
ancestral.
But like you say, I mean, we are going through, I mean, quite the dark night of the soul. But as you've said, every generation has had some iteration of that. I mean, there have been respites here and there, but people talk about the halcyon days of the 50s. Well, if you were black, it was not exactly halcyon days. So just saying, but every generation has had to go through hard stretches. So through your work, people can learn how to consult those people. How did you can ask that question. How did you get through those dark nights of the soul?
And that's really true. I actually asked one of my ancestors, this is in the midst of the worst of COVID, and people were dying in New York City by the droves. And I asked an ancestor who lived through the 1918 flu pandemic because that killed 50 million people worldwide. How did you do that? So, again, I'm a tarot person, so I used my tarot cards. You can use whatever your tool is. But, I want to know how they got through hard times. How did you get through corrupt government? How did you get through, horrible presidents or corrupt legislatures? How do you do that? Because we are in a very difficult time, and it is in my nature to look back and see how did other people do it.
Right. Let our ancestors be the reinforcements that can guide us to how to get through this time gracefully and you know whole.
Yeah. So I think the only thing I have left to say is please leave a comment telling me 30 evenings of working with spirit, those beyond the veil, or whatever thing
It's
that
just so cool. I mean, and then you can say you kind of helped write the book because
you absolutely.
you did. All right, so I will be culling my comments to see what people come up with.
Alrighty.
Nancy, it's been great having you. I should have had you a long time ago, but I'm delighted that this third book in this trilogy has been written.
Thank you.
And I know people will love it and feel um, guided and um, sort of held by this work as well as your other two books. So
Yeah,
thank you for coming on and thank you for your
thank you.
beautiful contribution to not just the metaphysical community, but to the human community who are trying to just find their way.
Thank you.
And you all, happy weekend, happy Sunday. I will be here tomorrow. The same old grind, looking at whatever there is to look at. I hope you've enjoyed this little Sunday respite, and I'll see you all tomorrow. So take care.